want to welcome everyone and thank you for signing up for our program tonight. I think this will be a very entertaining evening. I just finished the book that's our program's titled, The Hidden History of Lake County, and I would highly recommend it to our patrons. And it'll be, I bought a couple copies, and it'll be in our new nonfiction section. And having said that, please join me in welcoming Jennifer Engelking.
Engelking, yeah, you got it.
The author of The Hidden History of Lake County, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of the library system. I was just there. I took my kids yesterday, and I always try to get them to bring their own backpacks because I have one of the library bags, and then I end up with everyone's books. And we almost max out the limit, I think, every time we go. But I have memories of my parents who are on right now. Hi, Mom and Dad, taking me when I was a kid. Just always reading to me and making like books and stories a really important part of my life. And I know that that's where like my love of reading and stories started as a kid. And I always wanted to write. So I grew up in Lake County, right by Euclid, in Willowick. I had my grandparents were in Euclid, and I had always heard like some stories growing up that there was a shipwreck that happened. As a kid, you just hear that like, oh, maybe there's gold, maybe there's a treasure from it, not really hearing the full details of it. I knew that there was a Willow Beach amusement park, and actually, as we're speaking, let me get my PowerPoint presentation up here. And that they were kind of intertwined. That one happened in 1850, and then Willow Beach Amusement Park was like 50 years later that it was created. So those were kind of the stories that inspired me to want to find out more. Are you seeing my screen, Rob?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the cover of my book, Hidden History of Lake County, Ohio. It was published by the History Press on April 19th, 2021. And on the cover, this is Willow Beach. So this is the amusement park I mentioned. And this was about, I don't know, a half mile from my house. It looks much different there today, but I love the cover. I think it captures that time period, but also I love Jim Dudash of the Dudash Factory in Manor. He did a great job colorizing it and giving you that little hint of Lake Erie up in the left-hand side. So as I mentioned, I wanted to write for a really long time. My Aunt Peggy, she was in charge of the volunteers for many years when I was a kid at the Lake County Historical Society. So I have memories going with my parents and my brother Mike, and we'd go and visit her at the Historical Society, and she would show us around, and we would go when they had the Little Mountain Folk Festival. And I just remember being really impressed with like the period clothing and just the whole experience of it. So she knew I really wanted to write, and I got this opportunity to write. This is my first published article. It was for the Lake County History News and Review, October 1995, and there I am with, I think, permed hair. And I wrote about my experience going to Pioneer School. I think it was like a couple years earlier, where you would go as a field trip and you would learn about candle making and making butter, like churning butter, and a one-room schoolhouse. So this is what I consider my very first article and kind of where it started. And this again is my book, front and back. I wanted to put the iconic Lake County Lighthouse on the back, and that's a beautiful photo by Andrew Cross. He's with AC Aerial Photography in Manor, and he does some really cool pictures if you follow him on Facebook of lighthouses and places around our area. So I am going to talk just kind of about a few stories in my book. My book covers the entire county, kind of the story behind the story, hidden pieces that most people don't know about from east to west. So I'm going to start a little bit towards the beginning. First of all, this is a map of Geauga and Lake counties in 1857. So there are 88 counties in Ohio. Ohio is the smallest. It's 228.2 square miles. And because of its size, it was almost actually prevented from becoming a county. Pioneers in Painesville, that was part of Geauga County, they got tired of traveling to the county seat in northern Geauga. So they decided to create Lake County using part of Geauga and Cuyahoga counties. So the area they proposed, though, didn't meet the minimum size requirements to become a county. Luckily, they discovered original surveyor maps, and part of the land was actually under Lake Erie. So on March 6, 1840, Lake County was created with around 2/3 of its land lying under the lake. So that is some truly hidden Lake County history. So this is Vine Street and Lakeshore Boulevard in the early 1900s. So this would be looking west on Lakeshore Boulevard, going south on Vine Street. And obviously right now there would be a gas station there, North Shore Mall. And I just think it's interesting to see how much it's changed. The roads around here used to be really difficult to travel on, really bumpy and narrow. And then down the road, we have Lakefront Lodge, which is, my family and I love the Metro parks and love going to Lakefront Lodge to watch the sunset. But it was actually the site of a really tragic shipwreck. This is a recent picture of Lakefront Lodge in 1850. And it was the sinking of the G.P. Griffith. So the Griffith was named after Griffith P. Griffith, who is a businessman from Maumee, and that's near Toledo, Ohio. And his ship departed Buffalo, New York on June 16, 1850. It was a 3-year-old steamboat. It was 600 tons, 192-foot side wheeler. So it carried 326 passengers, 256 in steerage, 43 in the cabin, and a crew of 25, including many European immigrants headed west. In the early morning hours on June 17, 1850, there was a fire that started on the Griffith. And it was, it's believed that it started near the entrance to the lake by the Sugar and River because it had stopped in Fairport Harbor. It stopped before that in Erie, Pennsylvania, and no one saw. There was nothing wrong with it. It actually had more passengers who came onto the ship. And then in the early morning hours of June 17th, there were some folks who were up early and they looked out at the lake and they saw a glow, and it was the fire of the Griffith. And this was really close to shore. The thought was that they were going to ground the ship, get it on the beach, but as they were doing that, they hit a sandbar, and it was just the right combination of the wind and getting stuck there, and the fire spread very quickly. They didn't let down any lifeboats because they were worried that they would be swamped. So they were waiting for the steamboat to actually stop, and then they were going to let the lifeboats down. So unfortunately, at that time, people were not only weighed down by heavy clothing, and there are some stories that possibly they had coins and valuables that were sewn into their clothes, but people didn't take swimming lessons like we do today. So many of those people who were on that ship died, and it's still to this day, it's, I think, rated as the 3rd worst of the shipwrecks in all of the Great Lakes. So some family members were able to give proper burials to the bodies that they recognized, and then others were buried actually right on the sand. Some stories say that they were buried on the sand. Some say they were up higher on a cliff. Most of the old newspaper articles that I came across said they were up higher on a cliff level, which I believe would put it somewhere around in between Lakefront Lodge and Willowick and going down Cresthaven into the Sylvan and Bruce area. So that, just knowing that it happened, this is up at Lakefront Lodge. There's a marker and it's got a little bit of information. And that I think was put up about 15 to 20 years ago. But there's just a lot more to the story that I go into in the book. And then 50 years later, the Everett and Moore, who created the Interurban Railway, they decided to also create Willow Beach Amusement Park. And this is right across from Shoregate Shopping Center. This would also spread across the area where those graves were believed to have been, going into Cresthaven, where there is now neighborhood Willow Beach Park. And there still is a pavilion, they believe, that is from the original, which is actually on my cover. So there's a pavilion at the park that you can see from the street that is this color. And they think that at some point, to avoid the erosion, that they probably pushed it back so that they could save it. But this was a postcard, and you can see there's the inner urban. You can see the train stop. This back here was the dance pavilion. You can see some people getting their picture taken, it looks like there. And this is called the House of Mirth, which from what I looked up and did research, it looked like around that time that was a kind of a fun house at the amusement parks. So I think that's a really interesting picture because it's got a lot of detail. But one of my favorite pictures about Willow Beach is this one. It is a car coaster. So people would drive their car up the coaster and they would just let it coast down and into a ravine that went down towards the lake. And probably wasn't super safe, but it seemed to have been a popular ride there. They also had a carousel. They had baseball. Here's the Willow Beach baseball team. I think that's such a great picture. They had baseball stands. They had planes land there. So this was really a wide area across from Shoregate. And there still is the neighborhood park. It's spelled differently, but it does cross the land that was originally the Willow Beach amusement park. And then as cars became more popular and as bigger amusement parks grew, like Euclid Beach and Geauga Lake, those were the things that really caused the demise of Willow Beach Amusement Park. So we are talking about libraries here, and one of my favorite stories in my book is about the first library in Lake County, the Manor Library, which is now Confectionery Cupboard on 615. So that building may look familiar to you. It was opened as the first Manor Library in 1903. It hosted community events, lectures, spelling bees, a 1-pound grab bag night. So people would bring a bag, they would pick a bag, and it either had food or clothes in it. If they picked a bag that had food, then they had to eat that food on the spot. If it had clothing, then they had to go and change their clothes and put on a new outfit. They had lots of parties at the library, but it was also, of course, a very important place for books. And Frances Estelle, she was the first librarian. She was so dedicated to cultivating a love of reading that she delivered books by horse and wagon to schools in the township. So she was quite a lady. Even on cold days, she worked in the unheated library, building new bookshelves by hand. And during the Great Depression, the library had to cut back on funding. So Frances worked for free for the first 3 months of the year so the library could afford to buy new books. And after many decades, the library was just too small for the growing community. So a new library opened in 1960. You can see this one. The old library building was at risk of being demolished, but mentor realtor Lila Moore Schaefer understood its historical value and had it moved to its present day location on the corner of Nolan and Center Streets. That just amazes me, as I've done a lot of my research, how many old buildings they just up and moved like this, and usually not without a whole lot of damage. So one of the stories that also inspired me was when I was a reporter. I was a freelance reporter for the News Herald, and I remember going there when it was still open and had a restaurant, and the owners at that time took me on a tour, and they showed me some really narrow stairwells and the tunnel that's underneath the building and really huge pieces of coal that still remain there. And they just told me about some of the history behind the building, and it's really fascinating. The Unionville Tavern is believed to be the oldest tavern in Ohio. In 1798, a small log cabin was built in the settlement now known as Unionville. It provided temporary housing for settlers who arrived when the Connecticut Land Company opened an office nearby. It was just 12 by 15 feet with windows covered in greased paper and walls covered in mud. One of the original cabins in the Western Reserve in 1803, it was designated as a stop on the first mail route between Cleveland and Warren, and the building was expanded upon in the 1820s and served as a stagecoach stop for years. And I'll read a section from my book about that. Guest meals cooked in the big stone fireplace and a room serving as both kitchen and dining room included fish, game, vegetables, and fruit. An 1845 ledger quoted $1.50 for breakfast, dinner, and overnight lodging for a man and a team of horses. By the mid-1800s, the tavern was serving as a stop on the Underground Railroad. It's believed that enslaved people escaped through tunnels leading from an empty grave in the Harpersfield Cemetery under what is now State Route 84 into the basement of the tavern and then out through the field behind the building. So besides its historical relevance, the Old Tavern has been an important gathering place for many years. There have been weddings there. People have enjoyed it as a restaurant, as you can see in this photo. This is the dining room. And a little over 7 years ago, the Old Tavern Preservation Society became the new owners, and they've done a lot of work since then. If you're ever out that area, it used to be really worn down, and they recently redid the portico, the roof, the state reinforced the foundation, and they painted it yellow, probably similar to my shirt color actually, which is the color that the Old Tavern was in 1914. And I have discovered a lot of little hidden stories and buildings that had passageways and things that were discovered when people had been doing renovations. For example, the Unionville Tavern, they recently found a butter churner in the walls that they believe was a time capsule that was intentionally left there. So they took a photo of it and they put it back on the wall. This is the Homestead House bed and breakfast, before it was the bed and breakfast. And it's a historic house in downtown Willow Beach. It survived a major fire. And when the current owners, Fred and Deanna Rowe, bought it and they started doing some renovations, they discovered bottles. They believe it was a speakeasy during Prohibition. Their son discovered a door in the floor, in the wooden floor, and it had a little latch on it. And when they opened it, it led to a stairwell that went down to the first floor. So they believe that was an escape route. And that's actually, although they had to remove the stairs because they were turning it into a bed and breakfast, they needed to have that space for a kitchen. You can still see that door in the floor in one of the rooms that you can stay at there, which is fascinating. And there are so many interesting people that I came across that are from Lake County. Lots of, war heroes. And one of the most interesting, if I can find the page here, was the only Tuskegee Airman from Lake County, Earl Lane. I know I'm getting close. Let's see. Here he is. Okay. So he's believed to be right there. He was from Wycliffe, and he was not only fighting for our nation during World War II, but also for his own equality. Before World War II, the U.S. Army Air Corps, which was a precursor of the U.S. Air Force, did not employ African-American men, but that changed in 1940 when President Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered the creation of an all-Black flying unit, which would become known as the Tuskegee Airmen, named for the training grounds at the Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama. So First Lieutenant Earl Lane graduated with his Tuskegee Airman class, and within a year, he was a major player in one of the most significant events in Tuskegee Airman history. He flew with the 332nd Fighter Group, which was known as the Red Tails, and was one of 3 airmen credited with shooting down 3 German fighter jets. First Lieutenant Lane earned 8 medals, including the Distinguished Flying Cross, and you can read much more about his story in my book. I'll just take a little sip of water here. So if you are on Euclid Avenue, across from Lake West Hospital and right behind Dunkin' Donuts, you will see what is left of this airport, which was called, you can see right there, Euclid Avenue Airport. And the hangar is still there. Now there's a private business that's being run inside of it. But this was an airport run by another war hero, Cook Cleland. He was a dive bomber pilot in World War II. He received the Navy Cross after sinking a Japanese aircraft carrier during a dive bomb and leading his section on a long and hazardous night journey back to base. So he also won, that was him. He also won the Thompson Trophy in the Cleveland National Air Races. And there he is with his trophy from one of the races. He ran Cook Cleland's Euclid Avenue Airport in the 1940s. He had 3 runways and a hangar. It was on the southwest side of the field with Euclid Avenue Airport painted on the roof. And as I said, you can still see it if you look next to Chick-fil-A and behind Dunkin' Donuts. This is Margaret Hurlbert, known mainly as Marge. She was known as the Queen of the Air. She trained to get her private pilot's license at the Euclid Avenue Airport. She decided to join the World War II efforts by becoming a woman Air Force service pilot, also known as a WASP. So to become a WASP, a woman needed to be at least 18 years old, have a private pilot's license, and at least 200 hours of flying time. For several years, she proudly ferried aircraft and bravely towed targets for B-24 gunners. When the WASP deactivated in 1944, she decided to get her flight instructor ratings and went into racing, even setting the international women's flight speed record in 1947. And if there's much more to their stories, I'm just barely touching on them to give you a taste of what's included in my book. There she is, and you can see city of Painesville on the side of this airplane. But if you've ever been in Willowick to Manor Park, you may or may not know the story behind it. It was named for Robert Mannery. I'm trying to find his section in here. He was a copy editor for the Plain Dealer, and he felt that he wanted some excitement. So he bought a 13.5-foot sailboat. He took it out on the lake with his family. They said that they wouldn't go out unless there was a small craft advisory to really get her moving. And they named her the Tinkerbell with the help of his children because they really liked Peter Pan. So here is Robert Mannery. And he decided that he wanted to take the Tinkerbell on a solo journey across the Atlantic from New England over to Falmouth, England. So he took the boat. He had all sorts of things that he would need. He learned to read the stars for navigation. He had boats pass him by, like big ships, and they were concerned and they would beep and they'd say, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" And he'd say, "Yep, I'm just fine." And then one large ship actually gave him a bunch of food. They gave him like rolls and potatoes and pop, and he said it was like Thanksgiving because he had been in this boat by himself for days and days and days. And here he had this like mirage of a ship stop by with food for him. And there's a really interesting documentary that I referenced in my book and got some of this information from. He fell out several times. He disliked sharks, so he quickly got back in. And let me show you, hundreds of people, when he got close to England, they would take boats like this just to get a good view of him coming into shore. So there he is in his 13.5-foot boat. And there's all these boats with many, many, many people crowding around to get a view of him. He said it was like Beatlemania. This was, of course, in the 60s. And he said when he got on land and he got in the car and they started leaving, there were just crowds and they wanted to touch the car and they just wanted to reach out to him. When he returned to Willowick, they had a parade in his honor. And of course, with the Tinkerbell in the parade, he was given the key to the city and had Manor Park named after him. Let's see. So this is, I've been to West Point Park many, many times in downtown Willoughby, and I've seen this wall, but I never really knew the story behind it. There is a plaque there that explains that this is the Willoughby Friendship Wall. So more than a century ago, the Willoughby mayor, W.J. Carmichael, he lived across the street from the park on River Street. And while sitting on his front porch, he mentioned that he wanted to build a friendship wall in front of his home. So he notified the newspaper and he asked friends and citizens to donate rocks to build it. So people brought all sorts of things. Someone said they had a piece from the Great Wall of China. Someone brought a lava rock from Hawaii, part of a millstone, a meteorite. And he received so many rocks that he not only could create that wall in front of his home, but he did a whole other wall that is along that side of West Point Park in downtown Willoughby. So these are just a few of the stories from my book. And unfortunately, my slideshow didn't work, but I hope it was enjoyable to at least take a little peek inside my book at some of my photos and the stories that I have. And there are plenty more. And I really hope that it encourages people to look into just the hidden history in your own neighborhood, in your families, because the more I researched, I just realized there's everything so interconnected. And once you find one story, it connects to another one. And there's so much history in our area, in Lake County and Cuyahoga, just Northeast Ohio in general, especially because of our location on Lake Erie. And for more information about my book, you can go to my website. It is jenniferboresz.com. That's Jennifer, B like boy, ORESZ.com. And I'm working on my second book, which is very exciting. It's called Lost Lake County. When I wrote Hidden History of Lake County, I was really excited and I overwrote it a bit. I wasn't paying really close attention to how many words I had, just more to the stories that I knew I wanted to include. So it turned out it was a bit over what the publisher wanted, but I saved some stories that actually I think fit much better in a Lost Lake County book. So where Hidden History is about the story behind places that still exist in some form, like even if it's just, as I said, a pavilion from Willow Beach, Lost Lake County is about places that are gone, homes that are gone, industries that are completely gone. They are a little bit connected, but I'm in research mode right now and I've started writing it. So that should be published, I'm thinking, by mid to late 2022. So if anyone has any questions, then I'm happy to answer them.
I have a couple. In your new book, or even in this book, did you cover anything about the Underground Railroad? Because I understand there's a house that is still up that the Underground Railroad participated in.
Yeah, I did. And there are a number of private homes that are believed to be connected to it. As I mentioned, the Unionville Tavern, that was a big one that had connections to the Underground Railroad. They actually have an arrow that was passed down from some of the previous owners. The grandson donated it to them, and the arrow stood in the garden. And when it was going one way, it meant that it was not safe to go there. When it was going another way, then it was safe to enter the tavern. So yeah, I do have some other stories, and I'm going to include more in my upcoming book because it really is, it's such a big part of our history in Northeast Ohio.
And do you have anything about, my uncle lived in a house that had a tunnel. He was located right on the lake, and there was a tunnel that was blocked off, but it had gone under his backyard towards the cliff behind his house. And supposedly it was used for, I'm going to call them rum runners. You know, they were getting illegal liquor from Canada. Did you come across anything about that?
Yeah, so in my next book, I'm going to talk about the golf course that was where Shoregate is now. And I know that there was the tunnel that would have been from Shoregate to, you know, where Larimar is now. And that was connected to the golf course. I have heard mention of a tunnel that went out into the water. So I'd like to look into that a little bit more. I've not come across anything specifically like in my research. So I don't know if that's the kind of story that, you know, it gets passed down by people who have seen it, and not so much by finding it in like a newspaper article. But yeah, I'd like to find out a little bit more about that tunnel. That I wouldn't doubt it. I know there's so many stories about the rum running with being on the lake during Prohibition. And that is one of the areas that I want to dig into a little bit more for Lost. Yeah,
his house was located at Lakeline, you know, the city of, is it Lakeline? Yeah. I think right next to the, I don't know if it's the town hall or whatever for Lakeline. So it was located close by there, just in case you wanted to check on it.
Yeah, I do. The house is there currently?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, I would. If you have a chance, if you could even send me an email, I'd love to ask you a few more questions about that because it sounds interesting.
Okay, I will.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
I was just generally wondering, Jennifer, there were like a couple parts. in your chapter on legends and myths and discoveries, and I was just wondering, were there some of those that you discovered when you were writing your book, or were there some things that you remembered hearing growing up, like the legend of the melon heads? Was that?
Yeah.
some-
Oh, I have looked for the melon heads. I remember as a teenager, mom and dad,
Okay.
we drove, not with them, but letting them know. I went with my cousin and some friends,
Uh-huh.
and we would drive around Kirtland, and never saw anything though. But yeah, so some of them are just from growing up here and hearing the stories, and then you start researching them, and there are variations to the story. Like Dr. Crow, there's different ways his name is spelled. There are variations on what actually caused the melon heads to look like melon heads.
Right.
Yeah, and then there was a few that I came across just when I was researching, like the story about strawberry shortcake being created here. That was just in an old newspaper article that I don't know if you saw that one, that there was a woman who said she was making a cake basically, and she had a lot of strawberries, and she said, oh, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna make some whipped cream. And then she told her friend about it in New York, and they said, that's a wonderful idea, we'll do it too. And so that's kind of like the legend of how I didn't know strawberry shortcake supposedly had its beginnings from here. But yeah, a little bit of both.
I was curious too, like your description of Gravity Hill. Have you ever driven down that and experienced that going uphill and feeling like you're going downhill?
Yeah, it's pretty weird. It does feel like that. And my husband and I, our kids, we had to go. We were very careful, and there were no cars around. I don't recommend it if it's busy, of course, but yeah, it does feel like it's the opposite of the movement that you're doing. Strange phenomenon, but apparently that's a common. When I was researching it, there are many gravity hills across the country, so it's not the only one where that perspective of the road and what you're actually traveling on has a unique feeling to it.
I thought it was interesting too. Like, I wasn't aware of this, but like how maybe early in the 20th century or late 19th century, that really wealthy people in the Cleveland area looked at Lake County as like a summer resort, or like you build a home out there. And so you had two homes, I mean, it probably seemed a lot farther back then, but like, I want, like, now I think like probably wouldn't, just because of, we've come a long way in travel. But that was interesting to me. I did not know that. And I mean, it's always just beyond my imagination to try to picture what it would have been like to travel. I mean, if you were coming from like the New England area to where Lake County is now in like the 1700s. I mean, I've driven in my car from Cape Cod to Cleveland many times, and that is a long day. And to try to imagine it, I would think that it would be just as unimaginable for someone back then to try to imagine flying in an airplane or like flying in the air. And
it's hard for me, especially, not only the distance and how they traveled, because some of these stories I would come across, and they would cross a bridge, and these bridges were just like planks. And so if their horses or the oxen they were traveling with, if they misstepped, it was not good. It was very, very dangerous. And there are stories of that where they, just barely made it to the other side of the bridge. But then I also just think it's so interesting to think of just how they got through, because the areas were not cleared. So, even still, if you're in a part of Lake County where it's really wooded, or Cuyahoga County, and it's still pretty thick, you think like, yeah, it's fun to go maybe hiking like at the metro parks, and that's fun. But to do that for weeks and weeks and walk through just continuous land like that's not clear. I can't imagine what that was like. I'm actually reading The Pioneers, borrowing it from my dad, so thanks, Dad, by David McCullough, and it's fascinating to you read these firsthand accounts of what the pioneers went through. This book specifically is talking about going to Marietta, but they still come through our area to get there. And it was a hard time. They went through a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I was wondering too, like the construction, the building of I-90, like, I mean, just wondering, I don't know if you just know personally, like, was that, how did that influence Lake County in certain ways? Or, I mean, I was just thinking of that, today. That was, I mean, it must have made, I'm not even sure. I mean, I guess I could have looked it up when I-90 was built. I mean, I could remember when 480 was being built, but I-90, I don't, but that, that was, maybe like in the 50s, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, there were some stories like Mountain Creek Tree Farm. When I talked to them out in Concord, they had mentioned just the difference in their business. People, if they went there, it was mostly just people who were local. And then once, the freeways were built, how it expanded their business so much, and how it was really in like the 50s and 60s that tree farms for Christmas, and not just going to get a tree on your own in a forest, became a more popular thing because of the increased transportation. And I
Right.
know also the Old Stone Schoolhouse, also in Concord, there's stories of, I think it was the foreman, someone who was involved in the building of the freeway at one point had their offices based out of the schoolhouse. And yeah, so I mean, I didn't dig a lot into that area, but yeah, it is interesting, just
Mhm.
the kind of before and after of how it changed what people could get to. Like you said, like in my next book, I'm writing about the Little Mountain Resort that was just a destination for people mainly coming from Cleveland, traveling to where Holden Arboretum is now in Kirtland. And that was a long ways to go to get there. And there were beautiful hotels, and it was just like this gorgeous resort area that is now completely gone. So it's been lost. But just how much that changed after more roads were built and the
Yeah.
transportation changed, like Willow Beach too. I mean, not that the freeway affected it, but as soon as people started taking cars instead of the interurban, people would go, they take the interurban, like hundreds of people would go for a company picnic from
Wow.
Cleveland, and they would go to Willow Beach. And so Everett and Moore, who ran the interurban, they were making a lot of money, not only on the tickets, but also on the fare to get into Willow Beach, and the cost of food and whatever else they charged for there. But then that was just really affected by the automobile.
Yeah. Well, I guess, does
Oh,
anyone else have any?
yeah, yeah. I have a comment and a question. My comment is that I live in Eastlake and I commute each day to Euclid on Lakeshore Avenue. So it's really neat to see the this well-road road I'm very familiar with every day, and seeing it how it was in the past. So I'm definitely looking forward to checking out the book and seeing my my same old commute in a different light. And
Yeah.
my question is that I also kind of live near Lost Nation Road. So will your upcoming book be delving into that? Because it certainly is a very mysterious name. And
Yeah, my current book actually delves into that a bit. There's different there's that those are one of those stories that when you try to look it up, you get different variations, kind of like the Melonhead story, where one story said that the road was very difficult to pass. It would, when it rained, it would get really, really muddy. And so the people who were on, the one end, the further end closer to the lake, that was the Lost Nation, because it was hard for them to reach the other end where they were shops and churches. And then another was that group on one end was a rowdy group and not as church going as the other group. And so they called them the Lost Nation. And then there's other stories that tie in with the Native Americans and possible battles that happened. So yeah, those are all included in this book. But I would like to get into a little bit more. I tried to touch on some of the road names and where they came from in history, but there are so many that I feel like you could keep researching the roads alone and find interesting stories behind them.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And also, I wish I kind of didn't know about Willow Beach Park because now I'm thinking it would be nice to have a nice roller coaster amusement park so close to home, but I guess it's
Yeah,
not meant to be.
I know. I would be, I would love to be able to go back to that time period just to see what it, really was like back then. But yeah, it's neat to imagine. But thank
Thank you.
you. Thanks for your question.
I can tell everyone too, I liked your description and I learned the possible origins of the name Johnny Cake
Mhm.
Road, which that I mean when I would every time I've seen that sign, I just wonder where in the heck did that there's gotta be a
Yeah.
story there. And so that is in this book, just to give everyone a little teaser.
Yeah, that's a funny story. And then also, it's the only recipe in my book, but it's a recipe for Johnny Cake. It's an authentic recipe
Yeah.
that I got from Dan Maxon, who runs the Old Stone Schoolhouse from their archive. So
Okay. Yeah.
an original, everyone has to try out.
Yep. Okay. Well, does anyone else have any more questions or comments for Jennifer? Okay, Jennifer. Well, I just want to thank you again. And, I have your book here. I'm going to be returning my copy tomorrow, so it'll be on the shelf for someone else to check out. But thank you so much for your time. And I really appreciate it and enjoyed your presentation this evening. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone who
Thank you.
stopped to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was fun.
We'll be looking forward to your next book.
Thank you.